Well, I didn't expect to wake up this morning sounding like Chewbacca, so forgive me. But the joy is, the universe has a good way of reminding you that you're not in control, but I'd planned this session to be very interactive because, frankly, nobody wants to be talked at for 45 minutes at 9:15 in the morning. So you're going to be doing a lot of talking, thinking, interacting with each other. Because if you were here yesterday, and I believe most of you were here yesterday, we had some great presentations about principles to communicate effectively, ways to reach your audience, and I think today is a good moment to practice some of that. So as Ed mentioned, I have a background in running environmental behavior change campaigns, and one of the things we'll talk about today is my experience in developing and rolling out Recycle for Scotland, which is Scotland's first properly national recycling campaign. Talk about sea of messages to cut through. So we'll talk about that a bit later, but for now, those of you who were here yesterday, George's presentation on the religious right actually set me up perfectly because, I'm just going to out myself. Obviously, I'm American. I'm from an American evangelical Christian Republican climate change denying family. So I have been set up to understand how to communicate with just about anybody, because yesterday when we were talking about people outside the bubble, I was thinking, those are just my parents. So how do I get them to be proud of what I do, to buy into what I do, without calling them environmentalists? Because they're raging environmentalists, but don't you dare call them that. They don't run the tap when they brush their teeth. They recycle everything they can. They don't do food waste. They compost, you know. And this is actually how I grew up, but they do it because they believe they're being good stewards of God's creation. So I think now that I am obviously, you know, a Green Party member with dual British-American nationality, I've come a long way from where I grew up, but it has equipped me to understand how important it is to not demand that your audience come to you, but to go to them, to pave the way for them to take the action that you're trying to get them to have. So I've coasted across sectors. I've run the Scottish Fair Trade Forum. I've worked for the public sector doing Scottish government environmental campaigns, and my last in-house role was actually for Nestle UK. So I don't believe in the bubble. I like being outside the bubble. I like building bridges outside our bubble. And so this morning we're going to practice that. So I'm going to go through here. How do we come up with a forest rather than just lots of trees? We've got lots of beautiful messages, beautiful campaigns. Then we get messaging and labels. So just some familiar ones. So show of hands, who in this room believes that would agree with this statement, there are a lot of environmental messages and people are potentially confused and don't take action as a result? Do you agree with that statement? Okay, good, then I have a presentation. I was hoping that would be the case. So what are we all trying to do? And why do we have too many messages? Because until we understand why we have too many messages, how are we possibly going to cut through them, come up with fewer? And it means maybe taking a good hard look at ourselves, and ourselves as a sector with many subsectors. Is it our messages that are creating too many messages? Is it my organization's messages? So I think the key for me is really focusing on effectiveness, because if we're trying to be effective, if we're trying to do things we can measure, if we're making sure that our messages are effective with the audiences we're trying to reach, then I think automatically it helps us to tap into some macro messages, collaborate with each other, ask the people we're trying to reach what works for them, and then rather than coming up with more messages we think will work, we're narrowing it down to ones we know will work. So this will be a bit of a practice session on that. So just on the ethical food labels, we all know this. Around 20% of British adults are too busy to care. 17% are suffering from green overload, and 23% are simply unsure what to do. So with those facts in mind, we're actually going to take, let's say, 5 minutes to do a little exercise. And your brief is simply this. Develop a campaign with your table that raises the national recycling rate. That's your brief. That's it. That was my brief at Zero Waste Scotland when I had to develop the campaigns team. The Scottish government said, right, we've passed this legislation. We've promised the world we're going to raise the national recycling rate. Do it. How do you do that? So over the next 5 minutes, just very quickly as a table, capture on a piece of paper how you're going to develop a campaign that will raise the recycling rate. I'm setting my alarm. Ready? Go.
I'm Andy. Andy Anyone in marketing involved? Anyone done campaign? Is it recycling? The sort of statutory policy measures like recycling the size of things, increasing recycling, is a sort of assumed.
All right, time is up. 5 minutes. Have you changed the recycling rate yet? I'm just going to point at a couple of tables at random and ask you to share what you've come up with. So those who are avoiding eye contact may get picked on. This table here looks like they're ready to roll. What have you guys come up with? And actually, do we have a roving mic, maybe? Thank you, Ed. All right. Share, what is your magical formula for how you're going to change the national recycling rate or local recycling rate? Give it 2 minutes.
2 minutes? I'm going to struggle to fill that time.
Okay.
So
That's a limit.
Up to 2 minutes,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So I think the first thing that we did was to, it was suggested, the most important thing was to think about who our audience is, who we are trying to appeal to. And we referred back to your statistics and started thinking about the number of people who are suffering from a green overload and the number of people who could potentially be influenced because they simply don't know how to recycle and how to act in a more green way than they currently are. And then we ended up getting sort of sidetracked by trying to get into the mindset of people who don't recycle in the same way that we do. All of us here are very committed recyclers, as I suspect many people in this room will be. So I would say that the main thing that we highlighted in our discussion was the difficulty of relating to people who don't recycle. I mean, the anecdotal sort of evidence that came out was of some neighbours. We won't say whose neighbours, we'll keep their identity protected. But they have the opportunity to compost waste. They consider themselves to be relatively green people, and these kind of messages would appeal to them, but for whatever reason, they simply don't do it. And that baffled us a bit and maybe got in the way of our short-lived campaign.
Well, seriously, the first thing on my list, you get a little tick. Who's your audience? But that's actually the point of this exercise, really, is how much time did you spend trying to understand your audience? Because if you don't understand your audience, there's really no point in building the rest of your campaign until you do. So good job. Shiny gold star for you guys. And I'll give you my parents' phone number if you want to know people not like you. You can just focus group them. I cultivate friends like that, actually. Like, who doesn't think like I do? Or who I can just call and be like, you think what? Okay. What would motivate you to maybe, it's always a revelation because we're all relatively like each other. So yes, cultivate some of those neighbors. I suggest it. Any other table want to share in up to 2 minutes? So you filled 2 minutes, good job. Table back there.
We came up with quite a lot of ideas. So the first one that I thought of was financial incentives, so actually kind of paying people to recycle, because I think we live in quite a money-driven society in quite a lot of European countries, and apparently in our own. They did used to pay for people to bring back, you'd get a kind of discount for bringing back plastic bottles and glass bottles. So buying recycled products in the first place, so actually trying to get people to buy secondhand clothes and recycled paper, things like that. So actually confronting the consumption. I can't really remember what we actually said for that. Telling people how much money they're wasting. So this was like another financial thing where you're basically showing people that they are actually really wasting money by not recycling. Moving more into kind of bulk buy culture, like in the US, where they have these kind of bulk aisles where you take your own packaging and you kind of fill up your cereal, your sugar, things like that, and you don't actually buy any packaging whatsoever. You just use what you've bought from home, so Tupperwares and things like that. And then also showing people what products can be made by recycled products. So all the clothes and rugs and things like that. So even having signs on a bin that you can see the products that can be made if you recycle your glass or your plastic.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, because very different approach, but still what you were tackling were audience barriers and motivators. So what motivates people? Money, which you'd have to test, but you're right. A lot of people, even if you tell them, because one of the other campaigns I ran in Scotland was Love Food, Hate Waste. And there was political pressure, I won't say from who, but to say it's about saving the earth, it's about environmental messaging. But actually what they found was the thing that people responded to, no matter how green they were, was you're wasting money. So you're wasting this much, exactly this much money per year. So yeah. And then you struck on, make it simple, make it easy for people. Just pave the way for them to do it, because with all the goodwill in the world, we need things to be easy for us. If you have a recycling sign that's not next to a bin where you can actually like throw away your cup as you're walking to work, chances are you won't do it. So really good points, thank you. Sorry we don't have time to go through all of them, but again, the point of that exercise was, are you really thinking of your audience first? And then how are you going about that? Because it is sort of a creative process. You may start with real deep audience analysis. You may start with what motivates them and how might we come up with some tactics, and then sort of go back from there. So the main things we were looking for was, who's your audience? How do you know that your message will work with them? Back to sort of what motivates them. Where's your proof? Basically, what's in it for them? So they hit on financial incentives, like a deposit and return scheme. And then, do you have a call to action? That's a key one. So we kind of didn't get that far, but 5 minutes, I understand. And the things that we're really going to harp on, there are two things I am really big on. Audience, understanding your audience, and then how are you going to measure your impact? Because if you don't know that it's worked, if you don't know how to measure it, how do you know that it's going to work? Which is key if we're trying to cut down our number of messages and reduce consumer confusion, householder confusion, citizen confusion, whatever you want to call people. And then how do you demonstrate the impact and thank people? Create a feedback loop. So one of the things that's really unique to the Recycle for Scotland and Recycle Now campaigns is they thank people for recycling. So I'm just going to quickly go into how I developed the Recycle for Scotland campaign. It was such a privilege to actually be given that brief. Sort of, welcome, you're going to set up the campaigns team, and without a team, your brief is raise the national recycling rate. And tell us what the budget is. So it was pretty easy to sort of survey the landscape and see that of 32 Scottish local authorities, they were struggling with budget cuts. Several of them were using Recycle Now, which had been developed by RAP in England, which is Zero Waste Scotland in Scotland, where I was working. So quite a significant amount of money had been invested in research, development, testing of that campaign. A lot of people in Scotland already knew it because the Recycle Now swoosh is on packaging. You'll see it here. And it was about understanding the stakeholders. So obviously, local authorities were the key deliverers of this, because the recycling campaigns are a little bit easier than some other environmental campaigns because it's very tangible. So there's a local deliverer that has to do it. People actually have to take an action, and then you can measure it in terms of waste diverted from landfill. So I ran consensus through consultation is what I like to call it, and consulted all the local authorities in Scotland and said, well, we can do two things. We can develop a completely new campaign that would unify everything, and we don't know what it will be. Or we could take this campaign that some of you already use and that's on packaging and maybe develop it, localize it, make sure that they know that it'll be localized. We're not just like bringing this campaign from England, and imposing it on Scotland. Bad idea. And of course, We got a good response rate. Over 30% of local authorities responded, which is pretty good. And all of them said, let's just develop Recycle Now for Scotland. So never ask a question you don't know the answer to already. So we got them on board, and then it was key to make sure that they felt bought into developing this campaign. So we used the terms co-design quite a lot. I spent a lot of time at the local government association standing in front of 32 local authority waste managers. That was fun. Usually the only woman in the room. I just wore heels and lipstick. And then offered them money on occasion, which helped. But so we definitely wanted them to know that it was their campaign and it needed to be local to work. And it was totally dependent on them. So they were bought into it grumpily at first because they were a little bit grumpy about the government cutting funding to them. But then as we started to test it with some of the ones who were really already good at this and were already using Recycle Now, we discovered some interesting things about messaging. So for one thing, in England, it's localized. So it's recycle for London, recycle for a local borough even, very local. And people like that. We tested in Scotland the messaging, recycle for Edinburgh, recycle for Stirling, recycle for your county, recycle for Scotland. And we found that something that actually really surprised us was that generally people really responded to Scotland as an identity. No shock here, obviously. But we thought it would be more local than that. So it's very different in Scotland because people liked the Scotland message. They felt that it spoke to their identity, which was more about a bigger identity than a local one. So that was sort of lesson number one in messaging. The other thing we learned was local authorities like to have a little room to do it their way, but we needed them to use the messaging consistently, and so we wanted to make it as easy as possible. So a lot of them would we developed creative, we tested it with people in different areas, with sort of some of the local authorities we knew would be trickier, and we tested it in your area. These are what people said would work, and they're all under pressure to meet targets. They adopted it. So they just took off the shelf the collateral we developed for them. And by the time it launched, does anybody want to guess what percentage of Scottish local authorities were bought into it? Just a guess. Just shout it out. Yes. So there are 32 Scottish local authorities. How many do you think had bought into it by the time we launched it? Almost. 92%. And within a year of launch, every single local authority in Scotland was using it. And the recycling rate has continued to rise. People are less confused because they see it on the packaging. They see it across the UK, so it is actually a UK-wide campaign, but it's been localized for Scotland. So really the themes that I want to pull out here are, we tapped into some macro themes. We looked around and saw what was already working and thought, we're going to try not to reinvent when we can actually just tap into something. We were fortunately in the position where RAP, Zero Waste Scotland, same organization, so we could just take that campaign and develop it further. But the other thing was, we did a lot of insight work, and I was fortunate to have a big budget because we had to, because it was public sector and my minister had to stand in Parliament and get my budget signed off. So it had to be rigorously tested, rigorously backed with research. But the principles from that are test things if you can, even if it's focus grouping with your neighbors, even if it's asking in a bunch of local people. It doesn't have to be a representative sample size. You don't have to commission an omnibus survey. It's nice if you can do it, but it's expensive. So the idea is, don't wonder. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know if it will work. You don't have to guess. You just ask people. And my big thing I always say, don't get married to your message or your creative or your favorite tactic or channel, because chances are you will ask the people you're trying to reach and they will tell you they don't like it or it's not where they access information, but they will tell you what works. So just come up with an idea, kind of anything, and then take it out to the people you're trying to reach and let them tell you what works. And then just do that thing. It really is pretty simple and actually quite scientific. So I think our challenge as a sector, we all care deeply about what we do. We all care deeply about the change we're trying to make, but sometimes we need to step back, and maybe I had to sort of come to this moment myself, step off my moral high ground and not care why people do what I'm trying to get them to do. Let them get to it their own way, for their own reasons, in a way that feels relevant to them and that they can then absorb. Because if we've done a good job, they'll think it was their idea. They'll think it's their community that does it. They'll think it's just the way we do it. Because I would always keep in mind when we were developing this and trying to find incentives and messages and placement for this, how do we reach people in high rises in Glasgow? Council estates in Glasgow were like the thing in the back of my mind because it was always the tricky sector, the tricky audience that we were trying to reach. Because they have much bigger things on their mind than which bin do I use to recycle my plastic? You know, so if you can motivate these people, you've done a great job. But if you can get anyone to think that it's their idea and it's the way that they live and the way that they do things and the way that their friends do things, you've achieved a lot because you've embedded a change, a behavior change. You've embedded your message, and that's something that then keeps its own momentum and spreads, because it's not just us sitting in an office, maybe as a comms team of one, trying to make a big change. It's how do we spread it out there so it can multiply? So we're gonna practice. We have got 9 minutes left. So your job is to create, I'm gonna skip through these, a campaign poster with those rolls of paper and the markers on your table. You have 5 minutes. And here are some guidelines. I've been nice this time. I've given you guidelines. Audience first, cause and effect. What's in it for them? Like, why would they do this? Don't just tell people to recycle. Why? Why would they recycle? What difference does it make? Give them a killer fact. Call to action, obviously important. And then how are you going to measure the impact? How are you going to know that it's worked? And then demonstrate the impact and thank people. So 5 minutes, setting the timer again. Go.
Do it on cycling. I'm actually ready. I have got a fact before, but maybe they can. I said, why is it based around COVID? When you get a bear that looks like a rabbit.
Okay, time's up. How'd everybody do? It's easy, right? Once you understand your audience, it's so easy. All right, I am just gonna pick at random. People who look like they want to share their posters. You can offer, or I'll just pick you. This table over here, George raised his hand. Would you like to come up here and share your poster? All right.
You want me to come up?
I can hold your poster. Come on up. I'll be the poster model for the afternoon. Go ahead.
Hi. We decided to pick a specific audience to try and target it a bit better. The audience we thought about were independent local pubs and trying to get them to cut down their waste. So Pints Western is an existing association of independent pubs in the southwest, and we know that industry waste can be quite big, so food waste. So what we came up with is the slogan of "Don't get too wasted," and pubs in the southwest throw away 5 million per year, which we completely made up. And then we were thinking a bit more about trying to encourage the industry to do better stock control, so not over-ordering and then wasting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and we didn't have time for a thank you or anything in there, but understandable, 10 minutes, not very long. Yeah, good. You've got the killer fact, you've got your message, you've got a very segmented audience to use social marketing speak. Yeah, great, thank you very much. Anybody else? Oh, wow, everybody wants to share. Okay, we're gonna have to do this fast. That table back there, we're working our way around. You have to come up. It's a bit like a game show, isn't it? You're welcome. Okay, here's your mic.
Thank you very much. So our audience was inner city Scotland, the example of being in large high-rise council estates. Cause and effect, what we aim to do was encourage recycling, and then for the local councils, with the money they were saving from not putting this into landfill, for that money to go back into building playgrounds. So what's in it for me? The aim was to, this was a playground, was the idea. Tapping into something that was already successful, a theme that came up, which was the Recycle for Scotland. This says Recycle for Playgrounds. The killer fact, we didn't know, but it was going to be X amount of money would be saved and put into playgrounds to tap into that. And so that was the call to action. Measuring the impact, very simple, just the decrease in landfill, the increase in recycling. And the very visible community sign to thank people would be these playgrounds that would come up thanks to their recycling.
Interesting angle. Thank you. All right, we've got 2 more. Oh, wow, we've got somebody who just leapt up here out of her chair. Okay. Cool, yeah, she really wants to show her poster. I'm excited about this.
I want to show everyone my art skills. So we came up with
Step away from the monitor. Okay.
schools and for a forest. I'll just shout. It's safe for a forest and it's for schools. We made up a fact that said, did you know your class uses 20 trees per year? It may not be true. So it was basically getting kids to recycle all their waste in their classes, and they can win prizes for their playground. So like a big tree sculpture or playground equipment that's themed around trees.
Okay, we've got the good kid angle. Pester power, we always called it when I worked in fair trade. So, all right, whoever can make it up here fastest. Oh. Wiz, I'm sorry, unfair advantage. I didn't know this table. We're just gonna leap in there. You guys get to go, and then that's it. Sorry. We're gonna take some questions after that. Okay.
Okay, so this got a little bit complicated, but we do have a fact, which is that... A real fact. A real fact from the Daily Mail.
Reaching those audiences we don't know. Okay.
Reaching what this is part of our thinking was that we could put prominently up here that it's the Paper Mountain costs the UK taxpayer £2 million. According to Daily Mail statistics, and that the Daily Mail will be something that resonated possibly with audiences that we hadn't been reaching before. And then you've got a paper mountain, and it's crushing this guy here, and he's screaming, and pound signs fall out of him into a bin. Up here, you've got some kids enjoying a book that's come out of the paper mountain, and down here...
Like they're falling from the sky, so, yeah.
Down here, you've got a picture of a house, but also a business, to signify that we're all in it together. And down here, we said thank you, because that's in the...
Yeah, that was clearly planned in from the beginning.
And we have the strap line, people win when we recycle more.
Okay. I like the creativity there and the real fact, although the made-up facts were fun, too. So last one, you guys back there, come on up. And then we'll take some questions. Isn't this fun? Yes. Yeah, okay. Creative is the best part of running campaigns, so.
Right, this is aimed at fast food eating students. And it's bag a burger, because 75% of litter on the campus is from burger joints, which is a complete lie, but that's what we're saying.
Good fact.
So we get some litter bags we get from McDonald's, we get them to supply the litter bags, or from Burger King. The kids go out, pick up the litter, bring it back, take it to the recycling centre and get a voucher. And that's it, really. It's just dead simple. And a free reusable cup.
Okay.
And obviously we can measure it by the amount of actual litter we get and the amount of tokens they give out there.
Okay.
And now obviously we don't really want people to eat fast food, but again it's getting this recycling message to them to start off with, then maybe they'll start thinking about that in the future.
And don't ignore the fast food eaters just because you don't like them or whatever. Yeah, okay. I like it, and also thought about impact, because I'm sure all of you thought about impact measurement, obviously. But yeah, I think that was really good. Thank you all. Did a great job early in the morning. So I think over to Ed now for some question time.
We've got 5 minutes, so do you want to take a pew,
Yes. And also, before I forget, this is what an actual Recycle for Scotland poster looks like. So we've got, thank you for recycling. Our business can help save Scotland a potential 175 million a year. Don't let a good thing go to waste. So yeah, and then Recycle for Scotland, obviously. And then sort of killer Factville, pointing back. My clicker's not working, so no, never mind. If we could go back a slide. 2 slides, yeah. So glass can be recycled again and again and again. So just thinking about the facts that really catch people's imaginations or whatever motivates them. So yes, thank you all.
Great. Round of applause, Betsy. And for you guys.